Hey guys, probably just like most of you, I spent Labor Day weekend watching reviews of the new Springfield Armory Prodigy. And, watching all the gun tubers go through and say how great it was and how buttery smooth the slide is and all that wonderful sales pitch, I decided to go out and buy one. So, obviously I'm not a sponsored by Springfield Armory. They didn't give this to me. I paid my own money for it. But I've always wanted a double stack 1911. So, finally found one right after the holiday and was waiting to go out and shoot it this weekend, which I did this morning. But as the week went on, I started seeing reviews by people who I would say they weren't given a nice Springfield Prodigy that it looks like it's been tuned and ready to rock and roll. They got one that just came off of the factory floor and shipped out to the store. So quite a few issues with reliability and cycling and ejecting and failure to feeds. So after watching all those, I spent yesterday tearing this down and going through and fixing all the issues that people had reported before I even went out and shot it. So when I talk about fixing, I'm not going through replacing parts or really grinding metal or anything, because from what I can see and just from dry firing and cycling the slide is that it seems like there's Cerakote in all the wrong places. So my goal yesterday was to take off the Cerakote in all these places where there are moving parts. So that being said, there are a few areas in which I took off ever so slightly material, and that was because of burrs, and I'll show you where I did that and how I did it. Now, I really don't have any special tools, so, and matter of fact, I probably have a lot of the wrong tools, but I make do with what I have, just like most of us do, because we're not professional gunsmiths. I'm not a professional gunsmith. I am nobody. So, since I'm nobody, don't take this for what I did as gospel. If you're uncomfortable with doing any of this, find a gunsmith who will do it for you and be happy with it. But if you're willing to take a chance, like I always am, because it's only money, then feel free to dive in with me. So I'm not going to show you how to take this apart. There are other videos of how to disassemble this. So I'm just going to break it down and show you all the areas that I paid attention to. Whether it's all of them, I can't tell you, but it's the ones that I could find and so forth. Also, I'll put up a little clip of me shooting today, and I put 500 rounds through it, so all this morning, and it did really well, except for I had 3 failure feeds out of that 500, and I'm not sure if I can get it in this light. Well, I'll show you when I tear it down where it is, but basically the round is getting stuck at the top of the feed ramp, but only 3 out of 500. Could be the fact, that I was running dirty ammo. I ran about 400 of those rounds were LAX remanufactured, which some people had said, that you shouldn't run reloads through it, and that was the problem. Well, it seemed to do fine a vast majority of the time, and I ran 100 rounds of PMC Bronze through it, factory new, and those were 115 grains. And I had one failure to feed, and that is also in the clip of me shooting. And basically when that was when I inserted my mag and I dropped the slide, and that's where I got caught up on the feed ramp. So yeah, we'll start breaking it down and showing you where all the issues are. Alright, so all broken down into an unneat, unorganized pile other than frame, slide. So I'll start from the frame and work my way up through everything. Hopefully I don't forget anything. But the nice thing is a lot of this is common sense. So that if you're patient and if you are marginally mechanically inclined, then you can go through this and duplicate what I have done and figure the rest out. So, when I talk about polishing materials, there's only been a couple things that I used. One was I just used some flits. And I just used it on my Dremel and just basically just polished any of the Cerakote or roughness away. So didn't remove steel at all. So, or enough to make it matter. The other material that I used was just some 1000 grit wet dry sandpaper. So just because, again, I don't want to remove a lot of material, that way I don't have to buy new parts if I don't have to. So, and the last thing that I used to take off some burrs was just this little diamond coated file. So you can use just a regular fine tooth file if you have one, and basically I used it here on the slide, which I'll get to that. So first and foremost, which we'll start here on the grip, and there were a couple areas that I focused on. So, and I found one today that I still need to focus on, and I'm really hoping that the lighting will work for us here, so without getting this in the way. So first is, well, here, let's start with the trigger and bow. So this had a coating on it. It didn't seem like Cerakote. It seemed more like a phosphate kind of finish. So, but all I did was I did two steps. The first was I used my 1000 grit to try to smooth it all out, and I did that on a flat surface, which my flat surface at the time, sorry about the arm in the way, not sponsored by HoloSun, but it's what I had here, and I basically just ground or removed material as flat as I could. Here, if you can see that. Nope, that was even worse. Sorry, YouTube land. So you keep it flat so that way you're not inducing any new angles. And I just polished this with the sandpaper until I knocked down a lot of the high spots and made them smooth. So here on the sides, not so much, but back of the trigger bow I brought down to nice shiny metal. So because that is going to connect with your disconnector, and that's what moves it up and down out of the way. So after I used the sandpaper on it, I took my flits and my Dremel and I just hit it and polished all the way around, including, if you look here on, oh, come on, be my friend, here on the grip, on the Prodigy, it has this little recessed area, and then it bumps out here on these corners. So this is where your contact is. So, and it rides right along the back of the grip right here. So I also polished these corners as well because it makes contact. I also polished the bottom of the trigger itself because that rides right here, right on your trigger guard. And then I also took a piece of sandpaper and, well, a narrow flathead screwdriver because I don't have any really nice tools for getting in there, and just kind of worked that little bed where that trigger goes. Also, I had a small burr right where that trigger guard ends inside of the magwell, and I just took a small X-Acto knife and I just kind of like shaved it off, just kind of deburred it so that way it wasn't catching on there. I also polished with some flits just this plastic right here because this is where it was riding, and deburred these edges. Now, what I learned today is that where this trigger bow operates in this channel right here, and I didn't have anything really good to get in there to polish it. I wish I had a small stone, but where your grip screws go in, it's in a metal rectangle that actually comes from about right here, and it comes down right below where that trigger bow goes and then back up. So where this trigger bow slides back and forth on is right here, and that is metal. So, and I got a small little burr right there. So, plus it sticks out a little bit past the plastic right there. Feels pretty flush over here, except for a small little raised ridge, but that's kind of pronounced, and I'm sure you can hear that. So here on the other side, slight little raised area, have a small ridge there. Yeah, I'm gonna have to invest in a small little stone to get in there, so just to knock that down. Okay, so those are the areas that I focused on for here for the trigger and the grip. I didn't do anything to the mag release other than it felt a little catchy inside of the plastic. I put a little bit of oil on it, and also a little bit of oil in here because I think there's just a little bit of Cerakote that got into the channel and it's probably just gumming up that spring ever so slightly. Alright, now on the frame. One of the first things that I did to this is I added a bunch of flits here to the rails, and also onto here, which if you look at the slide you can see where the shiny parts are, where it was rubbing ever so slightly up here. So, but I just added the flits in there kind of liberally, added a little bit of oil to it, and then I just worked the slide and just let it do its own thing. And after you do that, you will see that it'll naturally show you where all the shiny spots are, where it's making contact, and so that way you're not spending a bunch of time trying to guess and knock down all those areas and doing more than what you need to. So, but what originally prompted me to do this is that when I first got it and I was working the slide and doing some dry fire and so forth, after a while it started feeling gummy, and I noticed that the oil that it ships with from the factory on the frame and slide was getting really black. You know, it was just basically just powdering up all this Cerakote and making it stick, and it was getting pretty noticeable. So go ahead and do that, and just depending on, you know, it's like how bad it is. I mean, it's like yours may be completely different than mine, but just work that slide a lot, and you'll notice when it wants to be happy. And probably what you'll end up doing is you'll put it on, you'll work it for a couple minutes, and scrub it, take it off, you know, put a little bit of oil on it, and work it and see how it feels. And you're going to be watching your oil, and you'll see if it's still getting super black and everything. It'll eventually, you'll decide how much time and effort you want to do this. I just went through and did one round of that, working the slide for about 4 or 5 minutes. I wasn't really keeping track, but it felt like forever. So get it all cleaned off, and, you know, see where your high spots are. The other areas that I focused on or played with is the Sear and also the disconnector. So the disconnector, which pops through, let's see, I'm not talented enough to do this, pops through just like that and gets pushed down by the slide. Where it gets pushed down is this corner right here. Now, this corner had a very noticeable burr, and it was actually catching where I could pull the slide back just past the disconnector and hold it in place for a second and let that corner catch on the disconnector, and it'll hold it back. So I took my little diamond file here, which has seen a lot of use and it's pretty worn out, and I just ever so slightly worked a small radius into it to take that burr off. And then after I did that, took some flits, polished it up, and called it good. I also took flits to the disconnector, and this is after I actually have a small Arkansas stone that I was able to drag it on. You could do this same thing on a piece or something flat and your sandpaper, and just lightly drag it, keeping this angle, because you don't want to change these angles too much, or you might be buying a new disconnector. So make sure that you practice less is more in this, you know, especially if it's your first time ever doing this, and because you can always take off more if you need to. So, but after I kind of radiused ever so slightly these little sharp edges right here, I don't know if it was needed, but I just did it anyway. So I went ahead, polished it with the flits. Then I came down here, polished this small little section here, because this is where your spring grabs. I polished this back area, and I also polished this area. So this side, because it was nice and flat, I did grab my sandpaper and work it this way, making sure that I keep it perfectly flat the entire time. And then I hit it with the flits again. And then I did a small polish right along here on both sides, because this fits into the Sear. and that's not the right way. It goes like that, but polished in there, so that way, since it's a moving part, it won't have any areas to hang up on. Now the Sear itself, this was all coated in Cerakote, and so I took my sandpaper and just worked it, keeping it flat the entire time. Took off all the high spots so that way it won't gum up. And then I also took, I'm not a 1911 specialist or anything, and I polished areas that I thought might need it, and I may not have them all. I think I need to get one of these sides here also, but that'll be another time. So, but anywhere that I thought there might be engagement, which here's an engagement surface which had Cerakote on it. I didn't do anything file-wise or sandpaper because that's really hard to freehand. So I just took off the Cerakote with the Dremel polishing wheel and flits and left it. So, because if you start changing these engagement surfaces, you can actually make it worse. So don't do that. Hammer. So a couple areas here on the hammer. So on this little leg right here, which goes down into your mainspring housing, actually goes like that. This little ball end had Cerakote on it. I took that off with the polishing wheel, and it also had some weird kind of raised surface on it, so took that down with the polishing wheel. Also, kind of hard to see right in here to the mainspring housing where that little leg goes. It had kind of rough surfaces in there, and I didn't have anything really to get in there, so I took the small little stone for my Dremel, and just by hand I just kind of rotated and knocked down and smoothed out those surfaces just ever so slightly. So I didn't do a whole lot to it, just kind of worked it back and forth and just tried to smooth it out. Rest of the hammer. So here on the side, as you can see, I didn't take a whole lot off. I didn't know how much I would need to do on this, so I'm probably going to end up taking more off of here, but I got all the high spots that would fit into the boss, but I'm gonna do a little bit more here later. So I also, with the polishing wheel, hit, or the flits in the polishing wheel, hit these little engagement surfaces, because I didn't want to try to stone those because I don't have a fixture to do it. And as you notice, the name of the game is I don't have. So I make do with what I have. So polishing wheel on the Dremel and some flits, and just tried to knock off ever so slightly any of the Cerakote. So there's still a little bit on there. I don't know if you can see it ever, but a little bit shinier, it was a little bit smoother. So those were the areas there. And in case you're wondering, if you don't know, that kicks up like this and catches everything. All right, so I didn't do anything to the slide lock. All right. So little spring and plungers here. Now these go right in there. On the ends of these, where they connect on your takedown and on your slide stop, it was some rough machining, and it would be a little hard to to operate and sticky, and it just didn't feel nice. So again, Dremel, flits, just kind of polish that up and kind of make it worthwhile, and it was a big difference. So that's worth hitting. What I need to do, and you should probably do it, is these pivot pins, which go here and here, is polish these up because they have Cerakote on them, and the Cerakote's going to gum up and going to cause everything to stick. And in the world of 1911s, it's a sum of the whole part. So every little bit that you do adds up to make a big difference. So if you already got it apart, take the time, go ahead and either hit this with some fine sandpaper or with the Dremel and some flits or whatever your favorite compound is, and make these nice and smooth and shiny. And you can probably see kind of the rough machining marks on there. Maybe. And you can feel them if you run your fingernail. I don't know how well you can hear that. Okay, and if you heard what I dropped, it was actually just a small Allen, so not the end of the world. Alright, that's the mainspring housing, so we don't worry about that. It's grip screw, grip screw, grip screw. Okay. On this spring, what I polished was basically this short leg here, the front and the edges. I polished this middle leg on this side and a little bit this side. I did it because I was listening to an audiobook and was just in automatic mode. And then I polished here, which I think I need to do a little bit more. Feels a little catchy. And like I said, everything that I did yesterday was my first go-through. So just trying and feeling out what everything's going to want to do and how it helps. And, you know, for the most part, I think I'm like 98% of the way there. I just need to get that last 2% on a few little things, you know, like the spring and the grip where the trigger bow goes. All right, over to the slide. This is your two-piece spring guide rod. And what I did was took sandpaper and knocked off a lot of the Cerakote that was on it. And I also had a few high spots that you can hear. Some areas are better than others, like this is the worst side. So, but that had a sharp edge to it, and I hit it hard with the sandpaper just to try to knock that down so that way this rounded spring will go over smoothly. And obviously I didn't get the front end, you know, because it looks nicer just all black instead of a little bit of shiny, and actually that looks pretty cool. Kind of crusty like that. I like that. But then I hit it with some flits and just kind of polished it. I'm probably going to do a little bit more, but not too much to that. All right, this guy, whatever the technical term is, fits right in there. And I didn't worry about the outside. The inside had a little bit of rough surface, and it still does. So I just took my Dremel and some flits and just kind of knocked down some of the sharper areas. And remember, you're just polishing. You're not actually removing material. So that's why I could get away with that. All right, so forgive me, I didn't take the firing pin and the extractor out. So just for giggles, I did remove the firing pin, and it has a couple of little raised up areas on it, and that allows it to help cycle in alignment with the firing pin hole. And I just took the Dremel and some flits and kind of went around those two areas and just smoothed it out. Not saying that it needed it, but you know, I did it because I was in the gun and I was cleaning it and I wanted to get all of the old factory oil out of it. Also, what I did is in that firing pin channel, which I wish I had a reamer, because I know there's some overspray Cerakote in there and eventually it's going to gum up. And since I didn't have a reamer, I literally took my drill, chucked up a Q-tip, put some flits on it, and I just worked it back and forth into the chamber, just trying to take some of that garbage out. Remember, be creative. You can do it. Just find a way. Did not do anything with the extractor channel. I basically just cleaned it out. I didn't polish the extractor or anything like that. Okay. Disconnector rides along this flat surface here, ends up down here. I took my used diamond file and I just kind of worked it, knocked down the high spots, trying ever so hard to keep it as flat as possible. That way I don't get any rounded edges or change the geometries on anything. So then after that, flits, Dremel. We already talked about knocking down this edge right here and taking off that burr and polishing it. Didn't do anything to the face. I didn't do anything into the barrel channel or anything along those lines. Barrel. The only things I did were here on the chamber end. The feed ramp I polished. Right here at the top of the feed ramp is where I got my three basically failures to load. So the rounds hung up right here, and you can see that is where they were all hitting. And I'm not feeling anything too much, but it could use a little bit more polishing. So I spent more time down here and apparently didn't spend enough time, which now that I'm holding it and getting some different light angles here, I can see some slight machining marks, just small ridges. So, but not too bad, just ever so slightly, but it could be enough. Plus, obviously, this is pretty dirty. I was running some really dirty ammo and still worked great. Now, I did polish the chamber, and I did that because I could see some machining marks. Now, a little hack for you is you take your Dremel tool. This guy right here won't fit into your chamber. However, if you chuck a new one up and then get it going, hold your Dremel tool, take a really sharp knife, or if you have an X-Acto knife, even better, and just like you're turning wood, just kind of shave it down ever so slightly, and then keep checking to see fit. And as soon as it's snug, you're there, stop shaving, load it up with flits, and then just work it back and forth into your chamber. So that was a nice little last minute figure out that I did. I'll pat myself on the back later. So, but that works if you don't have a chamber reamer to go ahead and polish and finish that off. So, but the rest of the barrel, I didn't do anything to. And yeah, it's dirty. It's had 500 rounds through it today. And also I ran it kind of wet because I wanted to make sure that I didn't get any gumminess, or if any more Cerakote ended up coming off, that it would stay suspended instead of just coagulating and causing issues. So overall, if you're willing to spend the time and just go through it and pay attention. Oh, hold on. Sorry. Right here. This is where your sear and your hammer kind of fit in between. I don't have a stone in order to get in there and really smooth it out. Honestly, I winged it and literally took a piece of sandpaper and I had this door shim. And I ever so slightly just knocked off what I could to try to smooth it out. So, almost forgot about that. Sorry, guys. But if you have the stones, hey, if you have the stones, spend some time in here, make sure that this is perfectly flat, there's no burrs from these holes, but mostly get rid of the excess buildup of Cerakote that is in there. Alright guys, so that is everything that I found or have decided today that I need to do, and I think it should be golden. You know, it's like I would not throw this gun away, I would not sell it, I would definitely keep it after all of this because it runs really, really well. And once I get that last 2% done, then I am going to be a really happy camper. So, hope this helps. Thanks for watching, and you guys enjoy your day.